Thank you for taking time for Swedish television. And the reason we're here is to talk to you about a debate which is, there's a lot of energy in at the moment here in the United States, and that is about how we think about the process of living very long, death, dying. And I'm just going to start by a very open question. Could you sort of describe to us some of the sort of key points in your own thinking? You're 71 now, and sort of what are you planning for? What are you thinking?
Well, my thoughts about this question go back long before I was sort of posing it as how long do I want to live? But I asked myself in college, when I had difficulties making decisions, I gave myself a little principle, and the principle was the decision is a good one if it's something I really want to do now, but also if I looked at it 5 years from now, I would think it helped me move forward in my life in the way I wanted. And if I looked at it when I were 81 years old, I would be proud of it. So it began that way. And I would try, I only did it with a few things, really. I didn't do it all the time. But it began establishing the idea of looking back at my life from 81. And eventually I began to feel 81 was a good length of life. It allowed one to live into a third age, but it didn't become sort of overly ambitious about trying to stay alive for the sake of staying alive. I cared more about the quality of life. This was very influenced a few years later by my grandmother's, what we call suicide. She was 91 years old. She had been a Christian mystic and a poet, and one of my closest friends. Amazing to be able to talk with an older person that way. And she had lost her eyesight and was writing her memoirs and loved to read and write, obviously. And nobody would tell her that the operation hadn't worked. She really did not want to live dependent on others. And ultimately, she had a broken hip, so it was difficult for her to move, but she managed to climb the tall barrier of her balcony and throw herself down to the ground when she could have taken some pills right by her bedside, but didn't realize that was the case. I felt very proud of her for taking matters into her own hand, and yet very sad that we had not had a kind of conversation where she could make her wish clear and where we could be with her at her death and where it could be less violent than it was.
So in what way did your grandmother's suicide influence you?
Well, it made me feel, it reinforced, I guess, an inchoate, unexpressed feeling that we have a right to take some action in terms of the length of our own lives, that we can be responsible for composing our life as a whole, and we don't need to just that simply trying to live as long as one can is ultimately meaningless. It seemed to me. So, but that doesn't mean that one. That one wants to commit suicide. So what are the other, there's ways in which I do not want to die. And so I began paying attention to those. How do you let other people know and talk with people so that you are not kept alive under circumstances where you don't want to be?
We're going to talk about the, prospect of dying and how you want to die. I know you have many thoughts about that, but if we look at the decision of wanting to live at 81, you call that the ideal life. In what way does it influence your life and planning now, having this very sort of a tangible time span?
Right. Well, it's hard to tell whether the fact that I had begun thinking about 81 has influenced this so much, but mathematically, the three ages divide: 1 to 27, 27 to 54, 54 to 81. Those are three 27-year ages. So it's meant that since I was 54, I felt I'm in my third age, and that the issue in the third age is not so much to do more and how much can I do and get done, but is more to bring it to, if you will, a beautiful finish. Now, of course, we can't guarantee anything. I may, in all my plans for dying at 81, I may die tomorrow. But it means I think about the whole last part of my life differently. Instead of working as long as I can, I retired at a relatively early age of 63, and in order to do the things I really wanted to do, which among others were to spend more time making and deepening my friendships. So I'm very glad that that is a very significant part of what I have the time to do now. And those friendships permit the kind of conversations about what one wants to do with the rest of one's life. And
how about more practical aspects, like for instance, financially?
well, of course, that is in a way helpful too. I remember sitting with the financial person at our university who was saying, you really need to work a couple of years longer if you still want to be making the same amount of money you are now at the age of 96. And I thought, the likelihood of my being alive at 96 is small no matter what. I have no ambition to live to 96. I'm not going to be scared into thinking I need more money to be secure by this process of making you afraid that you'll get very poor. So ironically, the summer I retired was 2008, so my retirement savings were cut by a third within 4 months of the time I made my decision. But I decided, no, this is not something you're going to worry about primarily, and I've been very happy not worrying about it.
But to sort of put it in a short way, in what way are you then, has it helped you with your financial planning, or has it influenced your financial planning?
Well, I mean, it means that I am not going to suck up all of our family resources at the end of my life and leave my wife, who is somewhat younger than me and therefore likely to live longer, poor, or in any way straiten or make demands on my children that distract them from their own children, who are the ones where the real focus ought to be at this point in terms of resources. So it calms me to know that I'm not going to become a weight on other people financially. That's one way of saying it.
Yeah. So, and the reason, I had a question about, why 81, but you sort of answered that. It's sort of a logical...
Well, I'm not...
You define the 3 ages of a person's
right.
life.
I mean, I'm not ideological about this. When I say 81, maybe it'll be 82 or 83. I mean, I'll let events as they approach. And recently, as I get older, I have more problems. I think, oh, you've been assuming you'll make it to 81. You better get on with finishing these things you wanted to finish, because you may not. So, of course, 81 is arbitrary in some way, and I won't be guided just by that fictional number.
Is there any way one could say that your decision is guided by a fear of showing weakness?
I mean, I suppose someone might say that. The only reason why I'm quite certain that's not the case is because I show weakness all the time and vulnerability, and in fact, to be able to have the conversations about death that are necessary to come to peace with it, I think the most fundamental thing is to realize one's vulnerable and to not create a defense against that fact by saying, I'm going to be the one in control and I will live to 100 no matter what.
People who do think that they want to live to be 100 no matter what do you think is sort of going on with them?
Well, it would be incredibly presumptuous for me to say, but I have to ask, let's say you establish that that's what you want to do. Isn't the next question the question about the quality of your life until 100? And isn't in the end the quality of your life more important than the quantity? Because even if you are very powerfully oriented toward the goal, you can't, of course, guarantee you're going to make it. My father's second wife, whom he married at 90 and she at 88, had 5 wonderful years together. She was quite strong about wanting to live to 100, and a wonderful constitution. But when she got to be 98, she said, you know, I've lost that ambition now. It no longer, I feel like I've lived my time, and she died quite soon thereafter at 98.
But today in America they say that 70 is the new 50. That at 70 people are vigorous, they're playing golf, they're traveling the globe. Doesn't that influence your thinking?
Well, yeah, you mean it's great to be able to do things at 70. And, you know, luckily I've lived a life where in many ways even the profession I chose was chosen in order to permit me to do as I wish and have as much time at my own discretion as I could have. So, you know, to have another approximately, if I were to have another decade, what a grand amount of time it is. So I don't know, that doesn't, I suppose somebody who's worked their entire life very hard and retires at 70 and has enough wealth, they might say, yes, I definitely want to live till 90 or something, because I haven't gotten enough pleasures and travels in. But I'm not feeling so much that way anymore. My pleasures are more intimate in nature, I would say, that I can have by myself and with my closest friends. And I'm lucky, I feel, to have a wide range of very deep friendships. And in my case, that's one of the greatest goods of the good life.
That's your talent. How does your spouse and your children feel about your decision?
Well, my spouse sometimes tells me that I'm being selfish thinking this way, and that I'll be leaving her alone earlier than she would like to be left alone. And I think that's, you know, it's important for me. Obviously, it will be one of the things that influences my actual decision. My children, I think, my 3 boys, now in their late 30s, you know, I don't think they have any objections to my making my own decision about when I go, and that we're very fortunate in that they've all chosen to live in this area, so I see them as frequently as any of us can stand one another, and I don't think they have any strong feelings about that. You know, sometimes people make the argument that don't you want to watch your grandchildren grow up and become grown up, and my response is, well, of course that's a great pleasure, but that doesn't seem to me to be the purpose, the direct purpose of my life. So when I die is not going to be determined primarily by how old a grandchild is, I don't think.
Dr. Emanuel makes a strong point about when we as creative human beings give our biggest contribution. And there is this graph in his article showing that, you know, we are at our peak, highly productive, creative people like yourself, at a peak around 40. And after that, it sort of goes down. He also says that nobody's been given a Nobel Prize for research they've done at an age above 45. How do you agree with this sort of thinking? Is this part of your...
Ooh, this is making me ambitious to win a Nobel Prize for my work late in life. Because, well, I mean, I have definitely slowed down, no question about it, but I still have feelings of definite creativity and things that I want to complete that I hope will make my body of work more accessible to others. And so I think maybe, you know, philosophers, if I may call myself a philosopher, although that was not professionally my connection, tend to mature slowly, and mathematicians fast. They reach their peak early, and philosophers later, so maybe I'm one of the later ones. I don't know how much creative contribution I still have to make. I hope I have some.
But it's your ideal sort of that we should live a life complete and vibrant and I mean, has it to do with also with how you want to be remembered?
Well,
What do you
I
wish
think,
for?
I think so. I mean, let me make it clear that I think people are in very different circumstances. I have a friend, a woman who is 50 now, who only married a few years ago, who has a 3-year-old child. She's been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, is likely to die within the next months, and is fighting tooth and nail to stay alive for her daughter. And we're all, you know, committed in a community trying to help her to do that. So there's lots of circumstances in which it makes huge sense to me to fight to live longer. Let me check back in with your question.
My question is about, I mean, after the conversation we had yesterday, my sense is that your ideal is to have a vibrant life, being present, accountable, and then that it also has to do with how you want to be remembered by your family and friends.
Right. Well, yes. I mean, I've always been interested in what it means to create a true community of inquiry with friends who are really straight with one another and really help one another grow beyond our illusions. And so I hope that I can model that activity till my death, just as in a different way Socrates did. And to me, it's a very high, would be a very high honor if it were possible to die in conversation with my friends. I had an older companion, a very famous photographer, Minor White, who spent his last weeks among a circle of us who worked with him as he approached his death. And it was an incredibly moving, dignifying thing that affected all of us, had a deep impact on us. And it clearly was the way he wanted to spend his last time preparing for death. Whether it made a difference in what happened to him at death, we don't know, obviously, but that's one of the key possibilities, it seems to me, that death itself is in fact another transformation, and the way we prepare for it determines whether we come out awake on the other side of it or not.
Sort of a Buddhist thinking, or?
Well, it obviously connects to anyone who has the belief that there can be some form of afterlife. Socrates said we can't know, but and obviously we can't in any normal scientific sense of knowing.
What is your belief?
Well, in a way, I think that as an agnostic about it, it behooves me to prepare. I'd rather be prepared than not prepared. Maybe just the lights go out and it's over. But as you say, I think I would be remembered differently going that way than going and dying in an asylum. I do think, you know, that just as birth is coming home, people are having their births at home more and more, that death may come home also, and people may realize that they'd prefer to die at home than in hospitals.
Some people would argue that the sanctity of life is the biggest mystery, the biggest gift, and that it is not up to us to sort of meddle with it. It's just to be very accepting about, you know, how things go, and also to be grateful for whatever remedies that, you know, doctors might offer for us to live and be as comfortable as possible, as long as possible.
Well, it seems to me that's a fairly thoughtless argument. We are intruding, and the doctors are intruding at every moment, so to speak, or whenever needed. Their therapies have downsides as well as upsides. We're making decisions about which we want to engage with and what's going. I don't want to spend a lot of my next 10 years going to doctors. If I start having to do that a lot, it's going to reduce my quality of life and make it less worth continuing, it seems to me, because I do not see the value of using a lot of money and resources to keep me alive when I ain't doing nothing.
So what are you prepared to say no to? Are you prepared to say no to antibiotics?
Well, I think it's not immediately, but I'm definitely prepared to say no to various forms of resuscitation, various forms of being kept alive if I am not conscious, and I would like to have a threesome of my friends and family who would be empowered to make decisions if I'm no longer aware, and I would like them to fully recognize and take very seriously that I do not want to stay alive in those circumstances. And I would very much like other states besides Oregon and Washington in our country to have laws that make it possible to feel secure that you can make a choice about ending your life without having to worry about the legalism of it.
So just to be very concrete, if you're looking at 81 as your ending date, if you were to have a chronic illness, let's say you were needing chemotherapy, or would you also consider stopping that kind of treatment?
Yes, at that point I definitely would. I am very lucky in another incident in my life in that I have a woman I call my sister who died of ALS a few years ago now. In some ways, you know, people say that's the worst disease because in the end you get strangled and can't even breathe. She chose her way through that disease so that at a certain moment she could release the oxygen tube in her mouth and through a kind of inaction die with her friends and family around her. But the 2 or 3 years leading up to that moment when, as she said, she was choosing to stay alive every day, had an incredible impact on the community around her and her children, who grew up so much in their early 20s during those couple of years. So the effect on oneself and other people one can have through the preparation for death is enormous and really unexplored in modern societies.
So be a teacher. Okay. Two last questions. You spoke about death as a transforming experience. So you've shared some amazing moments you've had with your sister and also your friend, the photographer. So in what way do you think then that your own moment of death can be transformational?
Well, I mean, I assume I can't yet imagine it. And I think that's one of the things that, having felt myself go through some different transformation in my adult life, where I couldn't imagine what was going to happen after I couldn't even imagine the transformation was quite coming. And then the life after the transformation is really very, very different from the life before. So I'm afraid I don't think I can say. I don't think I can say anything very specific about it. Maybe I can say this. I was also very fortunate to have a spiritual teacher who, although I saw him rarely, had an enormous impact on me. And he died when I was 44, rather suddenly. In fact, I was going to spend a weekend with him the weekend after he died, and so I'd been anticipating being with him and then learned of his death. In the following 6 weeks, I had experiences I've never had before in my life, all having to do with intense feelings about his absence, which I gradually realized, why was I calling it his absence? Because in fact, he was present to me. So that gave an impression of, I felt blessed by that experience. And if anyone can prepare for death in a way that has that effect on anyone else, then it seems to me that that would be a wonderful contribution.
I don't want to be rude or impolite, but you did mention that your wife is younger. And one would think, well, if you were to marry a younger woman, isn't there some sort of promise there that, you know, given our age difference, I'll try to stick around for as long as possible, because we already do have the odds against us?
It isn't something we talked about at the time, I don't think.
What is the age difference?
20 years.
20 years.
So she's 50, I'm 70 now. I didn't have such a great record in my first two marriages, 3 years and 10 years. We've already been married twice as long as my longest previous marriage.
Congratulations.
So I see I'm getting better and better at this. I don't know how to, obviously that's an awkward issue, but I guess I don't. It's true that she's also from Taiwan and of Chinese background, and therefore has much more of a care ethic in a very direct sense. I think it might please her to take care of me with me being absolutely and utterly dependent on her. But that isn't a relationship that I look forward to. So it's just, I guess it's just too far outside my, my own capacity as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant from the northeast of America who has high independence needs.
Is it also a question of dignity?
Well, all of that is, yes, that whole thing is connected to dignity, since dignity is associated with some capacity for free choice. And so when that capacity ends, isn't it appropriate to end one's life as well?
Are you afraid of dying?
I don't feel afraid at all. It feels like one of the, or if not the greatest challenge in life. I have been trying to live life to its fullest in the acknowledgement that death could come at any moment, really. So I think it's better to be aware of the real possibility of death. Some spiritual traditions talk about keep your death on your left shoulder. Be that aware of it all the time. And for me at this age, the awareness is kind of internalized in my body. I feel myself moving in that direction. And it doesn't feel frightening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My name is...
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. My name is Bill Torbert, and I would prefer a kind of 81 as a length of life. Sorry, I totally bluffed it.
I got a lot of tape here. No problem.
Okay, and I think 81 is a good length of life, is what I said before. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm Bill Torbert, and I think 81 is a good length of life.